When I was trying on my wedding dress, I caught my fiancé pushing a strange girl against the wall in the fitting room and kissing her passionately. He was so sure that I wouldn't dare to risk my son's future that he said in a teasing tone, "Shout louder. Do you think I'm afraid she'll hear you?" I closed the door for him, but he didn't expect that I would abandon my son and run away from the wedding. Later, Lucas, the prodigal son, turned back and came to me with our son, asking for a reunion. He had gone to great lengths to find my place, but when the door opened, it was a little boy who looked exactly like me. "Uncle, if you want to talk to my mom, Dad will be jealous." My once rebellious son's eyes turned red, and he rushed over, trembling. "Mom, now that you have this bastard, are you going to abandon Dad and me?" When someone was tying the ribbon at the back of my wedding dress, there was a large piece of slack. I just realized that in just 1 month, I had lost so much weight. "Miss Emily, do you want to have it altered?" The designer invited by the Lucas family pinched the extra fabric around my waist, sounding hesitant. In the silence, I heard the flirting and laughing coming from the next fitting room. The girl's voice was soft and charming, and she was tactfully giving gentle reminders in an understated way. Probably biting her lip shyly, she kept her voice as low as possible even when acting coquettishly. The man's voice rang out playfully, louder. "Do I care if she hears?" He knew I was in the next room. He did it on purpose. The sounds mingled together. My vision became blurred. I raised my hand to wipe away the tears and looked at myself in the mirror. A wedding dress that didn't fit, and a haggard-looking bride-to-be. After a long while, I finally came to my senses and smiled, carefully closing the door of his fitting room for him. "Thank you, Sister Jinjin. It's okay. For a wedding like this, it didn't matter if there was no bride. Isn't Mr. Lucas afraid that his wife won't marry him?" The girl's voice was cautious and tentative, but I could somehow sense a bit of smugness in it. Hearing this, Lucas sneered even more. "She's so focused on her son. Do you think she'll be willing to give up the household registration of the Lucas family? This is the only chance for that bastard to cross the class divide." "Son?" My feet froze for a moment, and then I walked away quickly. Lucas and I were childhood sweethearts. After the Emily family fell on hard times, the Lucas family didn't forget the friendship from the old days. Seeing that my parents had passed away early, they took me back to the Lucas family. They took care of my food and clothing, on the condition that I always stay by Lucas's side. He treated me quite well. Even if it wasn't predestined by fate, we could still be considered childhood sweethearts with no suspicion between us. Even when the adolescent Lucas was taciturn, he would still protect me behind him and wouldn't let others bully me in the slightest. His sister Sophia had always been pampered and willful, but she would only act coquettishly towards me. Such a little thing would also follow me quietly and say, "So many people like my brother, but I only want Sister Emily to be my sister-in-law." He once stood on the rostrum in his school uniform and confessed to me in a high-profile way, saying that I was the love of his life. He also traveled thousands of kilometers just because of a joke I made and brought back a vanilla flower from the other side of the northern hemisphere for me. All of Lucas's rebelliousness seemed to be reserved for me. At that time, he stubbornly held my hand and endured 20 strokes of the family's punishment just to give me a legitimate identity. But now, decades of acquaintance seemed like a joke. Since I gave birth to Henry, everything had changed. But I didn't understand. Henry was his biological son. There was no way there could be a mistake. I had been by Lucas's side for so many years and hardly ever stepped out of the Lucas family's estate. Even the bodyguards in the villa were all female. How could I have had the chance to cheat on him? But on the day I gave birth, he actually disposed of the male doctor arranged by the Lucas family to deliver my baby right in front of me. With red eyes, he grabbed my neck and forced me to answer whether I had changed my heart. I was completely incredulous. The DNA identification report was right in front of him. Why wouldn't he recognize Henry? My vision gradually cleared, and I was pulled out of my memories. My phone kept vibrating. Before I could unlock it, continuous voice messages popped up. "Mom, just hold on a little longer. Do it for me. You also hope that I can be included in the Lucas family's genealogy like my cousin, right?" My vision was blurry as I scrolled up, and the last message was from yesterday. It was the one I sent to Henry. Mom will take you away, okay? Dad is already with another woman. I pinched the strap of my handbag and finally asked, Henry, are you really unwilling? Almost at the same time, the boy's hysterical roar came from the other side. For my sake, can't you just endure it? Why are you so selfish? If it weren't for your lack of proper manners, would I still not be in the genealogy by now? It turned out that the child I had carried for 10 months was like a sharp knife stabbing me. After I gave birth, Lucas made a big fuss, while Lucas's father remained silent all along. After a long silence, he finally said, since Lucas is unwilling, let's just leave it like this for now. When Henry was 4 years old, I took him back to the Lucas family to attend a family banquet. His cousin Oscar, taking advantage of his height, pushed him to the ground and said that he was just a bastard. Since then, that had become Henry's biggest psychological shadow. I was so focused on repaying their kindness, thinking that the Lucas family had treated me well, that I had a child out of wedlock. It was the stupidest decision I had ever made in my life. The Emily family had long been divided up completely. Now that I was all alone, there really wasn't anything worth lingering for. Perhaps as Henry grew up day by day, the Lucas family saw how intelligent he was and had the idea of having the child recognized by the family. That was why they planned this ridiculously minimalist wedding. By now, it was already half dawn. I was sitting in front of the dressing table when I received a WeChat message from Sophia, Lucas's sister. Emily, you don't have bridesmaids, right? The voice message was filled with nonchalance, and I could even sense a bit of schadenfreude in it. I'll send a few bridesmaids for my brother. Before I could react, my phone started vibrating crazily. Some unsightly photos came into my sight. I didn't even dare to look closely. Suddenly, I saw the man's face clearly in the photos. It was all Lucas. After calming down for a long time, I clicked on those photos and saved them one by one into my phone. The wedding was less than 2 hours away. She sent me the photos at this time, and her purpose was crystal clear. She was mean, but also soft-hearted in a way. After a long while, I forced a smile and replied with 2 words. Thanks. In just a few minutes, she had severed the last ties between me and the Lucas family. I suppressed my chattering teeth. I simply packed a few clothes and got up to leave. The wedding villa chosen by the Lucas family for me to welcome the bride was desolate and uninhabited. However, there was a car here. Seeing me passing by, the car window was slowly lowered, and a familiar and serious male voice said, "How boring it is to run away from a wedding. Why not just change the groom directly?" I paused in my steps, tore off the excess fabric of the wedding dress skirt, revealing my long and straight legs. The man in front of me was cool and noble, with a warm smile on his lips. I must have known him. But when I searched through all my memories, I really couldn't remember who he was. "Elope with me. I'll take you away." As if possessed by something, I stretched out my hand. Anyway, no matter how bad the situation was, it was better than being a smiling doll beside Lucas. As I was twirling around, my waist was grasped and I was led into the spacious back seat. One hand covered my eyes. "Have a sleep. Everything will be okay." My nostrils were filled with a familiar warm scent. "Mom!" I opened my eyes. The man in front of me was leaning against the bedside. Seeing that I woke up, he straightened up and patted the non-existent dust on his clothes. Awake. The long sleep had made my voice hoarse. Just as I was about to open my mouth to thank him, I saw the man in front of me adjust his glasses. "It's good that you're awake. Settle the performance fee and medical expenses together." "Huh? What?" "I took you out of the wilderness yesterday and played the role of a scumbag who ruined someone's marriage. Don't I deserve some performance fee?" I awkwardly touched the already torn dress, which didn't even have a pocket, then I raised my hand and checked my phone, only to find that the last bit of money in it had been transferred to Henry yesterday. I blushed with embarrassment. "Sorry, sir. I don't have any money now. Can I write an IOU?" His facial features were deep. His gaze was sharp but casually swept over the hem of my wedding dress. "Sure. My name is Oliver. Just write Oliver on the IOU. You have a child? I came to my senses and suddenly the image of Henry smiling gently at me when he was little flashed through my mind. Oliver. What a coincidence. He had the same surname as mine and his name was the same as the one I gave my son back then. The Lucas family had strict family education. Especially for boys, their names had to follow the family tree. Back then, I didn't know this rule. When I was pregnant, I rummaged through the dictionary and finally found such a smooth-sounding name. At that time, I lowered my head and asked Lucas, who was applying pregnancy oil for me, how the two words Oliver were. He still smiled and said that I had chosen a good name, but unfortunately, it couldn't be used. At that time, the child in my belly was so well behaved, and the man who had always been by my side hadn't changed his heart yet. A pang of bitterness rose in my heart, and I nodded, yes. He frowned and didn't say a word for a long while. My thoughts seemed to be suddenly pulled back. Remembering what the man in front of me said when he took me away yesterday, I tentatively asked, what you said yesterday about taking me to elope was. But I saw Oliver pursing his lips, his smile turning cold. After jumping out of one fire pit, do you just want to find someone else to support you? He seemed to have torn off the last piece of my fig leaf. That hidden thought was suddenly exposed. I bit my lip, not knowing what to say. Just then, a dog slipped in through the door, bit Oliver's trousers, and bared its teeth fiercely. The man sighed, stroked the dog's head, and then turned to me and said, don't have other ideas either. I'm not discriminating against single mothers. It's just that considering you have experience in taking care of children. He squatted down and picked up the puppy. It doesn't matter if you can't pay off the debt now. You can work for me. I looked up, but I've been out of touch with society for several years. I don't want to cause you any trouble. He was stunned for a moment and then unnaturally stroked the dog's neck. Take care of my child, Bella. Is it a boy or a girl? The man clenched his fist and put it against his lips, a furry baby. This job was easier than I thought. Oliver was usually very busy and could hardly be seen during the day. This apartment had 2 bedrooms and a living room. There happened to be a small storage room next to Bella's room, with a single bed in it. Oliver told me that he didn't hire a nanny to take care of Bella because it was naturally aggressive and not very affectionate towards people. But surprisingly, Bella was very affectionate towards me. It had a pair of wet, round eyes. Whether I went shopping for groceries or did housework, it always wagged its tail and followed me. During the day, when I played ball with it, it would quickly bite the ball and rush into my arms, then look at me with its mouth open, making small whimpering sounds, just like it was acting coquettishly with me. For some reason, I thought of Henry when he was a child. When he couldn't talk yet, he also looked at me with a big smile like this. Those round eyes were glistening with water, exactly the same as Bella's in front of me, and they were full of me. Suddenly, I felt a warm and wet touch on my finger. I realized that my vision had already become blurred. Bella was licking my hand. I raised my hand to wipe away the tears and found that my phone beside its feet was on. I squatted down to pick it up. I accidentally touched it and opened it, and then heard continuous accusations from the other side of the phone. Where have you gone, Emily? If this goes on, there will be no room for us to turn around. Don't you want to get Henry registered in the household anymore? Don't you even care about your son's future? Where are you? Who did you leave with? I saw you leave with a man on the surveillance. Which wild man is it? Mom, Dad said that as long as you come back, he'll change my name. Just come back, okay? If you don't come back, I won't have you as my mom anymore. Lucas's accusation seemed like a joke, but when I heard Henry's roar, I felt that I was the joke. The feelings for Lucas had completely disappeared with his repeated acts of cheating. But for Henry's sake over the years, I had been humble and submissive, never expecting that he would take everything I did for granted. I put both Henry and Lucas on the blacklist, feeling drained and slumped to the ground. Seeing me in tears, Bella was so worried that it kept circling around me. When it raised its paw to touch my face, I finally couldn't hold back and burst into loud sobs. Even a dog that I had raised for less than a month could understand my sadness. Why couldn't the father and son, to whom I had given my all, see my sincerity at all? In fact, the day I decided to leave was Henry's 3rd birthday. In the 3 years before that, although Lucas had suddenly become cold towards me, he was still a fairly qualified father. Henry was in poor health when he was little, and many times Lucas stayed up all night to take care of him. No matter how busy he was with work, he would still come back home to stay, and he didn't mention that male doctor who delivered my baby again. I thought everything would get better. At that time, I thought that maybe all men would go through this stage. Maybe they suddenly grew up and would have fears when facing marriage, which was why he had acted like that when I gave birth. Since he was willing to focus on the child, even considering the years of upbringing by the Lucas family, I shouldn't just leave at that time. Who would have thought that on that day, I would see the once carefree and passionate young man from my youth in such a disgraceful state? It was agreed that we would go back to the old house to celebrate Henry's 3rd birthday. Lucas was late and didn't come back. Seeing the child's eyes that were on the verge of crying, I made up my mind and went out. Unexpectedly, I bumped into Lucas's cousin at the entrance of the club. "Do you really want to go in, sister-in-law?" He seemed reluctant. Looking through the partition, I saw Lucas lazily raising his wine glass. The girls around him were all beautiful and bold. They seemed 100 times more lively than me. "Sir, would you like to taste this wine? I guarantee it's more fragrant than the one in your glass." The girl smiled charmingly and Lucas took the opportunity to pull her into his arms, without any sign of refusal. It was as natural as flowing water. Okay, I stared blankly at Boss Zhang sitting opposite Lucas. He was a partner that the Lucas family had been trying to win over all along and always liked socializing over wine and food. When I first entered, I thought Lucas was just putting on an act. It turned out that I was just being sentimental. I turned around, trembling and looking away. Then, without showing any emotion, I raised my hand. "Don't tell anyone that I've been here." From that day on, I knew. The young man in my memory who would betray the whole world for me had completely gone bad. "The thing you asked me to handle has been taken care of." Oliver rubbed his temples and handed a paper-wrapped package back to me. Seeing my stunned expression, he lifted Bella's paw and waved it in front of my eyes. Why do people still use such an old-fashioned thing to store stuff in this day and age? I gritted my teeth, my eyes turning red. "Thank you, Mr. Oliver." Since Henry was 3 years old, I had started looking for the things my parents left for me. When the Emily family went bankrupt, I was still young and didn't understand the principle of being on guard against others. Seeing that the uncles and aunts of the Lucas family didn't turn me away like the elders of other noble families who used to be on good terms with us, I thought they were my benefactors. They took the opportunity to divide up the remaining property of the Emily family and then took me in, earning a good reputation for not pushing someone when they were down and not forgetting their roots. Fortunately, I had a bad memory back then. When my family went bankrupt, I completely forgot about the package my parents left for me and didn't mention it to Lucas at all. It wasn't until little Henry didn't get to celebrate his birthday in the old house that night and lacked the blessings of the previous generation that I remembered the jade plaque my mother left for me. When I hung the jade plaque around Henry's neck, I suddenly remembered my mother's paper-wrapped package at that moment. "Emily, if you're ever at a dead end one day, remember to take the jade plaque and go to Xiangjiang. There's a way out left for you by your mother." I didn't know what my mother had left for me. But I knew that only my mother would never harm me. Oliver said that I owed him a total of 12,200 yuan. He provided food and accommodation and paid me 3,000 yuan per month. So in the 3rd month of working here, after I got really familiar with Bella, I also felt that it wasn't too difficult to earn this money. Every day I walked the dog and took a stroll, and I also had time to cook some delicious food for myself, but Oliver thought I was paying off the debt too slowly and insisted on finding me something else to do. On this day, while I was sitting there petting the dog, a girl with round eyes rolled in like a little ball, sat in front of me, and looked up at me. She didn't say a word. After staring at each other for a while, she slowly took out a storybook from her school bag. "Sister, tell me a story." It wasn't a difficult thing to do. I took the storybook and started reading it aloud, then I heard the girl's smartwatch suddenly ring. Take good care of my niece, and I'll add 1,000 yuan per month. Instantly, my voice became even gentler and clearer, and I read with more emotion. Seeing my change in tone, the little girl's eyes were full of smiles. Sister. She was very patient and sat there for the whole afternoon. On her round face, her deer-like eyes were bright and clear, and her skin was fair. She kind of looked like Henry when he was a child. Henry was precocious and never wanted to listen to my stories. When he was very young, he could already read bilingual storybooks by himself. Before going to bed at night, he would still look contemptuous. Who cares about your stories? You might as well work harder to marry into the Lucas family and become the legitimate wife of the Lucas family. But Henry had also been sweet at times. When was that? Probably when he was babbling in my arms. During the day, he was like a little son with his eyes curved in a smile. It was just before going to bed. Suddenly, my heart was in a mess. It felt like there were some broken emotions that flashed by so quickly that I could hardly grasp them. Looking at the little girl who was carefully eating the melt-in-your-mouth beans I had just baked, I felt a pang in my heart. The previous broken emotions disappeared completely. I just remembered the cake that Henry had swept to the floor when I first cooked and brought it to him. Forget it. Oliver said that the two who were usually very difficult to handle listened to me obediently. And I also got along very well with Cece. She was different from Henry. She just seemed willful and indifferent on the outside, but actually she was easy to talk to, while Henry seemed well-behaved and sensible, but in fact he was selfish and apathetic. Cece squatted on the ground and pointed at the soil in the foam box. Sister, it's sprouting. That was Cece's first day here. Seeing her looking out of the door with a longing look on her face while pretending to be uninterested, I softened. I took the initiative to take her to the vegetable market. It was probably her first time going to such a place. She took the initiative to run around, dragging the canvas bag. Maybe the strawberries accidentally fell to the bottom. When we opened it at home, a few of them were broken and oozing juice. She thought I would scold her, but instead I casually threw those strawberries into the soil where I had just accidentally killed the scallions. Then squatted down to be at eye level with her. Let's see if it will sprout together, okay? All I saw were her bright eyes looking at me. And then the little girl rushed into my arms all of a sudden. When her little arms wrapped around me, I was suddenly stunned. It seemed that Henry had been by my side for so long, but he had never taken the initiative to hug me once. Seeing Cece dancing with joy, Oliver also had a bit more smile on his face. He got some soil on his hands and smeared it on Cece's cheek, and then the two of them ran around me, playing and laughing. Suddenly, I wondered if Lucas hadn't changed. Maybe our family of three could have been like this too. At this time, there was a continuous knock on the door. Oliver and I hadn't washed the soil off our hands yet. Cece wobbled towards the door. When her little hand pulled the doorknob open, I suddenly heard a familiar voice. Emily, Emily, don't be naughty. I've come to take you home. Hearing that it was Lucas, I quickly ran outside, afraid that he might hurt Cece. Cece's parents were from Xiangjiang. Seeing that Lucas kept calling me affectionately, she rolled her eyes and said in a childish voice, Uncle, if you want to talk to my mom, Dad will be jealous. As soon as I got to the door, I saw the once rebellious boy rush in with red eyes. Henry rushed in. When he saw the cute and soft girl calling me Mom, he pushed her indifferently. I knew Cece was speaking up for me, so I quickly hugged the girl tightly in my arms. But then I heard even dirtier words from the child I had brought up. Mom, now that you have this bastard, are you going to abandon Dad and me? I took a step back and put Cece into Oliver's arms. Henry had already hidden his expression at this time and changed the topic. He was beaming with joy while holding the jade disc given by the family and said that he had a name now, which was Henry. He didn't like my surname. Clearly, the Lucas family hadn't done anything for him at all, but he was overjoyed to become a member of the Lucas family. The 10-year-old boy couldn't hide his thoughts. He smiled and grabbed my hand. Mom, Dad has accepted me back. Just forgive him. I still like you the best. I remembered how he had called someone else mom while looking well-behaved and sensible, and I couldn't help but want to laugh. "I won't go with you," I said. "I asked you before and you yourself said you didn't want to go with me." Suddenly, he rushed up and bit my wrist. Oliver was holding Cece in one arm and effortlessly picked Henry up with the other hand and spanked him hard on the butt. I didn't change my expression. "Mr. Lucas, we didn't get a marriage certificate and it's not a problem now. Take your son and leave. Don't come to bother me again." Lucas, who was standing behind Henry, didn't move a step. I remained expressionless until he took a step towards me. Then I saw that there seemed to be a glint of tears in his eyes. "Our decades-long relationship, can it be compared to this pretty boy? Emily, don't be so confused. Come back with me and live a good life." Live a good life? Living a good life. This was really the funniest joke I had heard in this century. If a dog could change its habit of eating shit, it wouldn't still wag its tail in front of me with a stinky smell around its mouth. The door was suddenly slammed shut. I heard Lucas shouting outside the door, "Emily, don't regret it. If you don't come with me today, I will never give you another chance to come back to me." Cece struggled and threw herself into my arms like a baby swallow flying into the forest. But at the same time, she raised her hand to cover my eyes. "Sister, they are dirty." There were no tears in the corners of my eyes. But the corners of my mouth curved up. Yeah. They were dirty. They didn't deserve me to look back at them even once. On the day when I had saved enough money, Oliver gave me the medical expense bill. Actually, it was just a few thousand yuan, but I still stubbornly transferred 12,000 yuan to his WeChat. The tall man looked down at me and smiled. "The performance fee was just me joking. Did you really believe it?" I took the several sets of clothes and daily necessities that I had bought when I was at his place and got into his car. Oliver stroked Bella. "I snatched you away from the wedding before, and now I'll send you off again." It wasn't until the car stopped outside the airport that I realized Bella had been constantly shedding tears. Oliver wasn't as sharp-tongued and incisive as before, and there was a bit of gentleness in his expression. Looking at the looks of the man and the dog, I strangely felt very familiar. It was as if I suddenly went back to my youth when all the feelings around me hadn't gone bad yet. I felt a bit dazed. Lucas in school uniform was standing in front of me. It seemed that the freshly washed white shirt still had the smell of grass. I couldn't help but ask, "Have we known each other for a long time?" Oliver's steps paused for a moment and he didn't turn around. Instead, Bella rushed over, bit my trouser leg, and nodded vigorously. I suddenly felt a pang in my heart and was just about to say something. Just as I raised my head, I heard Oliver call Bella in a hoarse voice, "Bella, it's time for us to go." I held back my bitter tears and entered the airport. When I looked down at the entrance from the second floor, the man and the dog had already disappeared. Those two figures seemed as if they had never appeared. Before coming here, I actually had the thought of getting something for nothing. I thought that everyone could be the female lead and so could I. I also thought that my mother had left me some heirloom or gold and silver treasures. But unexpectedly, when I followed the address to find it, I met a stranger. When she saw me, her expression changed. The arrogant woman instantly had tears in her eyes. The capable woman trembled and spoke with a bit of caution in her tone. "Rue, is she okay? Did she ask you to come and see me?" I shook my head and handed her the jade plaque. "My mother has been dead for many years. She told me before that this place would always be my way out." Her eyes became even redder, and I quickly handed her the paper-wrapped package. Inside the paper-wrapped package were a stack of letters. The receiving addresses were all here, but for some reason, not a single letter had been delivered. She looked at the covers of the letters one by one and suddenly burst into loud sobs like a child. I don't know how long it took before she came to her senses. "Just call me Auntie. I'm her younger sister." I had wanted to continue asking about the past, but then I saw that the serious Auntie stopped talking and remained silent. After she put her fingers on my pulse, her expression suddenly became solemn. After a long while, she sighed. "How have you managed to get through these years? Your pulse is really chaotic. How had I spent these years?" Looking at the gentle face in front of me that was exactly like my mother's, I bit my lip and started talking. I told her how I was taken back by the Lucas family. I talked about Lucas. And also about Henry. I told her how I had dropped out of school for him and become a full-time mother. When I got to this point, she suddenly interrupted me and asked me about my future plans. I didn't know how to answer her. But she pointed at the wooden plaque at the door and asked me if I was willing to learn traditional Chinese medicine from her. Looking at her hand, I couldn't bring myself to say no. I thought, if Mom were here, she would probably do the same thing and pull me out of the gloom. Oliver had disappeared. He didn't accept the money I transferred to him. No matter how many times I called him, there was no answer on the other end. I was grateful that he had rescued me when I was sad, but I didn't know how to repay him. Just then, Bella showed up. I don't know how it had traveled thousands of miles to get here. I searched everywhere but couldn't find Oliver. But seeing Bella, who was obviously much thinner, I quickly wiped away my tears and took it back with me. After all, it was Bella that accompanied me through the darkest days. I carried it back to the medical clinic, and Auntie didn't object. She just stared at it for a long time and said, "Feed it more. It's so skinny." I didn't have much of a foundation, but fortunately, I was quite diligent. If I couldn't remember something after one time, I would keep repeating it, and somehow I could barely keep up with Auntie's pace. Seeing that I was learning more and more every day, Auntie, who had always been serious, also had a bit more satisfaction on her face. Finally, she took the initiative to mention her relationship with my mother. But tears fell first. I just didn't want Rue's child to make her worry too much. She was such an independent person and surely wouldn't want her child to waste time in the family. It turned out that Auntie was my mother's younger sister without blood relations. She was picked up by my mother and then adopted by my mother's maternal family. When my mother picked up Auntie, she had not only been bullied, molested by an old man, but also planned to be sold by her family that favored sons over daughters. It was my mother who sold a lot of her jewels to buy Auntie back. Later, there were problems in my mother's maternal family's business. Some collateral branches had the idea of sending this adopted daughter to an arranged marriage. She didn't want to. When my mother asked her the reason, she found out that the younger sister she had brought up had feelings for her, so she helped the girl she had redeemed escape the marriage. But someone had to take the responsibility. As the only daughter in the family, my mother resolutely married my father. Fortunately, my father had long been in love with my mother. The two of them were a loving couple, and it was a good match. Seeing that my mother got married, Auntie finally gave up completely and went to Xinjiang in a fit of pique. The connection between the two of them was cut off. But my mother had always known where she was. She just didn't dare to get close again in order to make her sister stop having those thoughts. By this point in the story, Auntie was already in tears. Having been here for so long, it was the first time Auntie had lost her composure. Suddenly bringing up the past, Auntie, who had always been dignified and serious, drank too much wine. I don't know how many glasses of wine she had drunk. Auntie's expression when she looked at me suddenly seemed to thaw. That gaze was direct and full of pity, as if she was looking at someone else through my face. After a long while, she suddenly held my pulse. The art of traditional Chinese medicine is much more lenient than it seems on the surface. I can see that you have a husband who only has eyes for you and a well-behaved and sensible son. But you should know that today is not yesterday. But the right person will always come to you. I was startled. Thinking of the father and son who had suddenly changed their personalities, I felt like a storm was raging in my heart. It seemed that those broken memories that I couldn't understand before were all pieced together. Before, I didn't understand why both the father and son could change their personalities so much. But, could it be that they were no longer the same people? Just as I was making wild guesses, Auntie's voice sounded faintly. The wrong people will come back because without the good fortune from you they can only live a hard life. As soon the words were out, the TV in the corner suddenly turned on. Entertainment media interviews were being held at the entrance of the Lucas family. What's your view on the sharp decline in the stock prices of many companies under the Lucas Group? Mr. Lucas, is Henry your biological son? Henry, the woman who was supposed to have a wedding with you, has a different surname. So is Henry an illegitimate child? Is Henry related to the Emily family that disappeared many years ago? Were you involved in the conspiracy to divide up the Emily family? I was numb-faced. Just as I was about to turn off the TV, I heard Lucas say firmly, "Henry was born by my beloved. In order to protect their privacy, I didn't make my beloved's information public. Her name is Emily and she will always be my dearest wife. Please don't involve the most important person to me." When he hugged Henry in his arms to block his face and seriously and ostentatiously announced to all the media that I was his beloved, I couldn't help but feel sick and wretched. After covering Auntie with a quilt, I was about to go back to my room to review the knowledge of medicinal materials for a while. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The knocking was urgent. I quickly ran over and opened the door, only to see someone rush into my arms in a hurry. When I subconsciously dodged, I saw 10-year-old Henry looking up with an aggrieved expression on his face and asking me in disbelief, "Mom, do you really not want me anymore?" I stepped back, not wanting to wake up my sleeping aunt. Then I gently closed the door. "I've asked you before." 10-year-old Henry was already as tall as my neck, but he was much thinner than when I was by his side. His half-long hair was wet from the rain, making him look even more haggard. I clearly saw a flash of impatience in his eyes, but when Henry looked up again, he still had that pitiful look on his face. "Mom, come back with me. Dad has already given me a name. I've been included in the family tree. My name is Henry." Both he and Lucas, father and son, looked extremely haggard. Seeing that I was about to close the door, Lucas even knelt down in front of the medical clinic, which made passers-by keep looking back. "Kneel if you want. I won't go back with you." The moment the door slammed shut, Lucas suddenly rushed over to block the door, grabbed my wrist and pulled me out forcefully. "Come back with me. Stop making a fuss. It's just a few photos." "Is it really that serious?" Bella inside the house rushed out. Henry, who was afraid of the little dog, stumbled backward. His father, whom he blindly worshipped in his heart, didn't even spare him a glance. It wasn't until Bella bit Lucas's calf that he cried out in pain and looked back at Henry with hatred. "Useless thing. If you can't even bring your mom back, don't come home with me. The master has already said." Hearing this, I remembered what my drunk aunt had just said. Without me the good fortune of these two would be gone. I looked at the unrecognizable Lucas and the last bit of my memories disappeared. I did love him once. That rebellious yet warm young man who was willing to betray the whole world for me. But now it was really goodbye. I picked up Bella, who was determined to protect me, and stroked its head. It looked at me worriedly, raised its paw and touched my cheek. Then I took out a stack of banknotes from my pocket and stuffed them into Lucas's hand. "Mr. Lucas, here's the medical expense. If it's not enough, then so be it." The moment the door slammed shut, I said in a sarcastic tone, "Anyway, you owe me far more than this." Lucas limped out of the medical clinic. He was in a daze, but his mind was full of the image of Emily just now leaning affectionately beside that strange man. This was the first time in 10 years that he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Lucas squatted by the roadside and called for the system in his heart again and again, but he didn't hear any response at all. When he first received the task, this body was only 20 years old. Healthy, sunny, and full of vitality. He was no longer tortured by illness, and he also had money and beauty. He held the beautiful Emily in his arms with love all over his face. Emily looked up at him and smiled, so gentle that she didn't seem like an ordinary person on earth. In the past 10 years, he had watched her change from a young and beautiful girl to a virtuous wife. She would iron his suits for him every day and carefully match his ties and cuffs by herself. She would also make various kinds of soups and breakfasts for him. He thought. He loved her too, right? Just not as much as the real Lucas did. The young man following behind stamped his feet angrily. "It's all your fault. Mom won't come home with us. How can we have a good life anymore? Have you forgotten what the master said? You're a bad father." Lucas looked back at his son, who was making wild gestures, and raised his eyes with disgust. Are you addicted to pretending in these 10 years? Emily won't come back to the Lucas family, and it's all because of you. Lucas gritted his teeth, feeling extremely bitter in his heart. But whether he loved her or not, he couldn't live without her long ago. He gritted his teeth and ran back. He wanted to go back to the medical clinic. He wanted to take her away. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her that those inhumane tasks were all assigned by that system and had nothing to do with him. He wanted to tell her that he loved her. Loved her very much. A love that he couldn't live without. But when his hand stopped on the door, a tall figure instantly covered his shadow. Lucas looked up and met the eyes of the person coming. He couldn't help trembling, and then his legs went weak and he knelt down. Oliver sneered and punched him in the cheek. Blood spattered. After playing the role of Lucas for 10 years, do you really think you're the young master? He was stunned on the spot. It seemed that the moment the fist landed, he knew that he had been completely defeated. Before losing consciousness finally, Lucas looked back at the medical clinic. It seemed that Emily from that year was looking up and smiling in his arms. She said, "Let's name our child Oliver, okay?" Extra story, Lucas and Henry died on the day Emily gave birth. But except for these two, no one knew about it, because on the same day, two wandering souls, one big and one small, rushed into their bodies. Then the seemingly beneficent system appeared. If you don't agree to hand over your bodies to them, Emily will think that it was she herself who caused the Emily family to go bankrupt, killed her parents, and also killed you too. Lucas held the newly born baby's soul body and said in a gloomy tone, "Then when can my son and I go back?" The system still had a mechanical voice. "When the two hosts complete their tasks, you will naturally be allowed to go back." He held the child, and it seemed that everything had returned to calm. But Lucas sensed something malicious in it. He thought that the strategy tasks might not be too normal. However, he didn't expect that the system would actually ask the so-called host to bully Emily. What the hell was that so-called tortured love? It was clearly bullshit. He brought up his son's tiny soul body while watching that evil scoundrel go in and out of those places of vice time and time again, dirtying his body. He gritted his teeth again and again. On the day when he made up his mind not to just sit around and wait for death anymore, Lucas found that little Bella could actually squeeze the fake son's soul body out. So after Bella could understand human language, he told Bella about Mom at night, and during the day Bella could go back to its own body to accompany its own mom. That's why Emily sometimes felt a sense of fragmentation. But the one who suffered the most was him. That girl who had been carefully protected in his palms since childhood, how could she have been tortured like this? Emily. I told you before that you don't have to bow your head for anyone. Don't you remember? Fool. Lucas, do you really mean it? Is it true that as long as I turn into a little dog, I can stay by Mom's side? Bella stared at the screen in front of him, watching the habits of the little dog on it without moving. Lucas flicked his round head gently. Kiddo, call me Dad. Seeing that his son ignored him, he cleared his throat and said again, of course. When has your old man ever lied to you? Bella pouted. Then why are you a human? Lucas thought of the tricks he had played on the system and touched his nose. He wanted to take his Emily out of the Lucas family. Of course. He also had his own selfish motives. For example, when taking her away, he could hold her in his arms again. Emily had named Bella Oliver before. He wondered if Emily would notice when he went back with this name. What a contradiction. He hoped that she would know that he had never changed his heart. But at the same time, he didn't want her to know that he might really have to leave earlier. Hey Lucas. The tiny Bella, whose figure was translucent, trotted all the way to the man's side. Kiddo, how can you call your dad like that? Lucas's broad palm slapped on the boy's head and then he noticed that his son's expression was a bit off. Sure enough, the boy bit his lip for a while and then said with anger and helplessness in his tone, Mom is crying again. He tugged at the hem of his clothes, looking dejected. Didn't you say that we could go back to see Mom soon? Mom is almost bullied to death by those two bastards. Lucas, who was standing still, froze for a long while before suddenly squatting down and stroking his son's head. Bella, Dad can't go back. You're a little man now, Will you take care of Mom from now on, okay? The boy seemed to suddenly break down and hugged his father's calf, but Bella wants to be with Mom and Dad and never be separated. Lucas's figure was also translucent. His face still looked the same as when he left Emily that year, but his hair had turned completely gray. If Dad doesn't stay here, Mom will remember everything. From now on, every day she will be trapped in the pain of losing both Bella and Dad at the same time. She will be desperate and blame herself. Do you understand, Bella? Bella's eyes, filled with tears, were faintly red. Is it as desperate as when Bella and Dad saw Mom being bullied? Lucas nodded. Bella can still turn into a little dog and stay by Mom's side, and then wait for Dad to come back, okay? Bella smiled, forced himself to hold back the tears, rushed into his father's arms resolutely, and then walked out of the door without hesitation. Until the halo dissipated, the little dog held its head high, like a hero guarding a princess. The hair around Bella's mouth turned white in a circle, and finally, it stopped at the entrance of the traditional Chinese medicine clinic. The person inside who was running back and forth to decoct medicine heard a familiar voice giving a few instructions and then rushed out. Seeing Bella being picked up by the woman with sweat all over her face, Lucas breathed a sigh of relief. His finger pressed on the halo that symbolized mutual destruction, and the two stinking souls that had occupied him and his son disappeared instantly. At the same time, the bodies that originally belonged to him and his son rapidly aged and completely lost their vital signs. He took a deep breath and put the copper ring on his ring finger. A smile appeared on Lucas's lips, as relaxed as when he had successfully confessed his love that year. Goodbye. It was worth it to have tried so hard to protect the mother and son all these years.